For a workshop. I believe our first item is a presentation of the budget.
This is always a high point of the year, so we're glad to get started. And Mr. Mayor and members of the council, we would like to at least get started with the budget process. And tonight we plan to give you a broad stroke overview of what you'll be seeing as you get a chance to go through the budget in more detail over the coming weeks. So starting off, our total municipal budget for next year, talking about city side only, we'll have schools talk about them separately. We're calling for a total budget of about $44.1 million. That's $1.5 million more than the current budget, or about a 3.6% increase. And we'll get into some of the specifics about that here in a minute. Just so you know, about $2.5 million have already been cut from departmental requests that came in from the various departments. Of that, there's $524,000 worth of requests that were just cut from the budget. And there's another almost $2 million, $1,979,000, that is moved from the operating budget and recommended to be funded from fund balance. We can clearly, there's a list of all of the capital items. You get a chance to see those in the budget. A lot of the reductions had to do with minor line item adjustments based on history, and then some larger items, including less building maintenance items, for example, that weren't as high a priority as other items in a given facility. So a lot of those decisions have been made, and they're all fairly well summarized in the budget document. Some of the things that are driving the expenditure budget include personnel costs, which are up almost $480,000. That includes regular salary and overtime. Pretty much reflects the increases that we've provided to our various union personnel and city employees over the last couple of years, plus for some fringe benefits increases, about our fringe benefits are actually down about $264,000, largely because we have seen a reduction in how quickly our health insurance costs are increasing. Now that we have everybody transferred over to PPO 500, we're actually seeing a small decrease next year in health insurance estimates. One of the things we're also doing, as you know, we are seeing an increasing number of city employees retiring. When employees retire, there is a payout that goes with that in terms of accrued benefits, such as vacation and a portion of sick leave time. We are recommending grudgingly in this budget that a portion of those costs be picked up through fund balance in the amount of about $300,000. Partially because we think we are kind of in a few-year peak where we'll be seeing an awful lot of retirements of people leaving the city, and partially in recognition of trying to keep the impact on the tax rate down. But again, we can talk more about that as we get into the budget itself. A big increase in debt service, almost $840,000 or $850,000. I'll come back to that in a minute because this will be a decision that you'll get to make in the very near future. Other areas, the joint agencies are up $143,000. That includes a $67,000 increase in the airport, about a $12,000 increase in the transit system, and about a $65,000 increase for LA 911. All of those groups will be invited to come in at one of the budget sessions, so you have a chance to discuss their budgets with them in much more detail. Supplies are up about $193,000. The biggest category there is fuel. We're estimating that to be up about $150,000 last year. You may recall that we have had a very good locked-in price on both gasoline and diesel for the last probably 18 months or so. And of course, we've seen some price increases in fuels, although it hasn't been as dramatic as it was a few years ago, so we are anticipating that will go up. And then some smaller items such as our sand and salt budget, some additional costs for books and audiovisual materials at the library, and for some reason a bunch of our larger vehicles with bigger tires all came up with tire replacement needs this year, so that also went up some. Contractual services is up $122,000. Some of that is things like street lining. Our street striping budget is up about $21,000. That's reflective of the additional striping that we've been doing, particularly for crosswalks and arrows and things like that. Janitorial costs are up about $16,000. We have had a consistent problem since we went to contractual janitorial services with the quality of the janitorial work in the buildings that we have. We have consistently had to move from contractor to contractor. That has tended to increase our costs as we've hopefully gotten to a place where we get better service. Vehicle repairs are up about $30,000. That's mostly associated with larger fire department equipment, rust proofing, and some maintenance requirements that they have. We have included $10,000 in the budget for next year for additional recruitment costs, given some of the turnover that we're anticipating seeing in some key positions over the next year. And we have recommended $17,000 for some additional GPS expansions. As you will recall, this year we have budgeted to put GPS units in all of our public works vehicles. For another $17,000, we can get some automatic reporting that goes along with that for items such as salt and sand utilization, so we're recommending that. To return to debt service, as you know, that's the biggest probably single increase you see in the budget. It's $840,000, 10.4%. The reason for that, you will recall there's been some discussion about trying to hurry up and issue bonds before interest rates start climbing. So the budget that you're getting presumes that we are going to issue 2 sets of bonds this year. The first one is the one we did last summer, which was our fiscal year 17 LCIP. That added about $345,000 in principal to next year's budget. One of the things we've looked at and included in the budget is issuing bonds for the 18 LCIP in May. That will add an additional $623,000 in principal to next year's budget. The goal was obviously to sell this spring in order to capture favorable interest rates. We anticipate that the Fed will increase rates at least once between now and July 1st. We do, however, have an alternative, and the alternative is that we could continue to sell the bonds in May, but we could defer the first principal payment to fiscal year 2020. So put it off for a year as if we had issued after July 1st. The downside of that is we'll probably increase our interest costs for those bonds by about $130,000 over the life of those bonds, and those will be out there. We obviously time our bonds to the item we're borrowing for, but some of the items will run 20 years. So it's $130,000 effectively spread out over time. But the advantage is that we could reduce that additional principal payment and reduce the impact on our budget and also on our tax rate. So where instead of looking at a 51-cent tax increase for city side, we would reduce that to 18 cents. So that is an issue that you'll have to decide fairly early on in the budget process so that we can complete our planning for the issuance of those bonds. But it would have a fairly immediate impact on what our bond costs would be for next year. Instead of looking at $800,000, we'd be looking at something closer to $350,000 for that issue. So that could have a pretty noticeable impact on the budget going forward. On the revenue side, our revenues are up about 2.9%, $332,000. That is an improvement over the last 3 years where we saw revenues continuing to fall. The revenues that we're seeing increase or projecting to increase are auto excise by about $60,000, general assistance by $32,000. That's reflective of the 70% reimbursement that the state gives us, so you can figure out pretty quickly that means we're looking at somewhat of an increase in general assistance for next year. Tax sharing from the LA Air Park. We have a tax sharing agreement with Auburn where we share in revenues from that park, plus the in lieu of tax payment that we get from the housing authorities, so that's anticipated to be up about $43,000. Investment income is up about $50,000. That again is reflective of what we have seen and anticipate continuing to see in terms of increasing interest rates. I will continue to tell everybody we're not seeing huge interest, but for a while we were seeing almost none. So that certainly we're seeing some improvement on that revenue line. That's a double-edged sword, obviously. Parking is up $56,000 or so. That is largely due to monthly parking permits. We are seeing an increase in utilization of our monthly permits in our garages. Also a small increase in the daily use as well. So those garages are seeing more utilization. Tipping fees are up about $60,000. I think some of that reflects the change that we've done at the landfill, where we went to a lower punch pass amount allowance for people and a flat rate to simplify handling for other tipping at the facility. New program requests. One of the things you'll see in our budget, we ask all of the departments that if they're asking for something new or to restore something that was cut in the past, we ask them to submit that separately as a new program request. We do that so that you can look at it and doesn't get lost in the shuffle of all of the budget numbers. I will point out right at the beginning that none of these are funded. I think you will hear from some of the department directors as we go through the budget some compelling arguments for careful consideration for some of these items. But just basically, these include 13 new positions, things like an assistant city clerk, a civil document server in the police department, a fleet manager, IT coordinator in the police department, a battalion chief in fire, planner position in code, a principal clerk position in public works, a vehicle servicer at our municipal garage, 2 summer employees for our building maintenance staff plus an additional maintenance worker, a field officer for social services, a recreation programmer in recreation, and a library technician in library. Those are, all of these, by the way, can be found on page 18 in the budget, so when you get a chance, you might take a look at that. Some of the other new programs, Public Works Contractual Services for $11,500. That's basically a request that we look at contracting out some of the snow removal around city facilities that are now done by our building maintenance crews. City Hall, the library, the police station, Violations Bureau, those in particular. Technology-related requests for $78,000. The biggest single things there are a content management system for us to get into more automation of all of our paper documents that we have around the city, and a smaller request for a fire records management system. The existing system that we have over there is pretty much a non-system. It's almost manual, or as close to manual as we want to get, so we have difficulties getting good information out of the fire department. Capital expenditures, as I mentioned, there are no capital expenditures in our operating budget. This has been the way life has been since the recession, except for maybe 1 year when we did have some capital in the budget. We basically are not funding any capital on an ongoing basis. Some of that's okay, some of it's not, because there are things that we do every year, such as replace vehicles and pave streets, that we are not able to support in our operating budget. And as a result, we end up borrowing money and paying interest on it, so over time it costs us more. So this, again, is one of those trade-offs that's been made historically since the recession, trading off a little bit the reality of somewhat higher costs against trying to keep the tax rate low, in the eventual hopes that we'll see some growth in non-tax revenues and in our tax base, which has been slow. We are suggesting using about $2 million in fund balance to cover those expenditures, and there is also a complete list of capital expenditures on page 36 and 37 in the budget document. And other capital, we're looking at bonds in the amount of $11 million. That's down from what you saw in the LCIP, where we were $8 million over the bond limit. This would put us at about $5 million over, so at least it's moving in the right direction. So there has been a lot of cuts on the city side. We've eliminated about $2 million from the LCIP. The school side has eliminated about $950,000 from the LCIP. The school primarily took a look at their projects and have broken them up into two parts. First part would be basically your engineering or bidding of the project, and the second part would be actually doing the project. So most of what's affecting the school side is just a timing issue as opposed to a reduction in what they're proposing to do. I know you're all going to want to see this one, which is our fund balance analysis. As of June 30th of 2017, our unassigned fund balance was $16.4 million. Our current unassigned rate, taking into account revenues and transfers, is it's actually about close to 14.1%. The ceiling is 12 at $14 million and the floor is 8. So it's clear that we potentially have some room here. What we've used so far this year is $160,000 for the sidewalk plow. That brought us down to 13.9%. We are proposing the $2 million in capital and one-time uses out of the operating budget. That takes us to 12.1%. That leaves us still potentially with some room to take a look at using some of this to try to deal with some of our other capital needs in the LCIP. If you wanted to get to 10%, you'd be talking somewhere in the range of $2.5 million that could be available for other capital needs as we go forward. I have no doubts that we'll spend a lot of time on the capital stuff in this budget because it is obviously one of the big expenditure items and one of the areas where we are looking to try to get as close to our bond issuance policy as we possibly can. On the school department, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. We are going to have our chance to meet with the school committee and the school superintendent next Monday. We were originally told that was at 6:45. That has been changed. It is now at 6 o'clock, and it will be at Lewiston High School. So please make a note of that because we found that out today. Very quickly, on the school side, total revenues are up $7.6 million. It's about 14%. The vast majority of that is through state general purpose aid, $9.16 million in additional state aid. Of that, however, almost $3.3 million is for debt service associated with the new school. So if you back that out, you're more in the range of 5.8, as I recall, in additional operating revenues coming from the state. They are also proposing to carry forward $202,000 from last year. That's up slightly from the year before that. Expenditures were up $8.9 million or 12%. $1.4 million of that is proposed for 38 new positions that are recommended by the superintendent in his budget. And I know that those will be looked at closely by the school committee as well as the council when we have a chance to meet with them. It includes $726,000 in funding for 18 positions that were added to the budget this year in fiscal year 18. As you will recall, late last year, actually in July of last year, the state provided an additional $1.2 million for school purposes. And a portion of that money was used to pay for these 26 positions. They obviously then carry forward into next year's budget. They weren't reflected in last year's budget at the time it was adopted. It was an add-on with additional state funding.
So Ed, you had originally said 18 positions. It's actually 26?
Pardon me?
Yes. Okay, thanks, Heather.
$547,000 increase in facilities and maintenance, $1.3 million in health and benefits associated with their union contracts and health insurance costs, and that $3 million in actual debt service on the expenditure side. That's again primarily for the new school. So that I'm sure you will go into in much more detail next Monday when we have the opportunity to meet with the school department. The GNP IPD, for those of you who haven't been here before, we have a requirement in our charter that limits expenditure growth of the general fund budget. And that's limited to the gross national product implicit price deflator. We use the 12 months that end in September, except this year they haven't published that number yet. So we're actually using July's figures, 12 months to July. Basically in that period, the GNP IPD went up 1.25%. If our expenditures exceed that amount, that percentage increase, it requires 5 votes for the city council to approve the budget. The last few years, ever since we have been working to catch up with or stay equal with required state local share, we have always exceeded the GNP IPD, primarily because of costs being driven by required local share to meet state spending requirements for schools. So anyway, it's going to take a supermajority, 2/3 majority this year, because I can't see how we would cut $10.5 million from this budget, which is what it would take for us to get down to the 1.25%. The state also has a limit on expenditures. The state levy limit, it's LD1 is what it's called. It's was part of an amendment done to the budget a number of years ago at the same time that the state agreed to pay 55% of education that it's never done. Basically, the LD1 limit says that we have to limit our growth in expenditures to 2 factors: real personal income growth, which the state calculates for us each year, it's 2.61%, plus property growth. It's actual growth in property either through new construction, subdivisions of lots, things that add value to existing property. That's 1.2%. Together, that says we could increase 3.81. We are actually proposing on our side 3.6, so we are within that limit. This should come as no surprise because we are always within that limit. You get to compound, if you don't use everything in one year, you can carry it forward to the next year. So right now, our current limit, taking into account all of the underages that have come in over the years, we could have a tax levy of $48.4 million. Our actual tax levy is $32.2 million. That is somewhere around 30% lower than the state limit. I would be surprised if there are many, if any, cities in the state that are that far below that limit. So I think it just shows the extent to which we have been careful on the city side in terms of our expenditures and our tax levy. And again, I don't think there are many cities in the state that are that far under that limit. If we were over the limit, the only thing that would be required is the city council would have to pass a separate resolve recognizing that you're over the limit. And that just takes a straight majority, but it puts you on record. We've talked about this before, and that's our assessed value. As you know, we have not seen much in the way of assessed value growth over the years. And here you can see what we're talking about. There just hasn't been much. The last couple of years, it's actually been down. I think that reflected some transitions of taxable property to tax-exempt property. Before that, we were growing slowly. I think over time, we're averaging somewhere around 0.8% per year growth, and that continues to be a problem. Hopefully, we'll see that change. I think we're all crossing our fingers at the CMP project because that could have a tremendously positive effect on our assessed value, which would be very welcome. The county tax, as you know, we have limited control over the county tax other than the representation we have on the County Budget Advisory Committee. But the county tax is proposed to be $2.7 million next year. That's a 4.9% increase, which represents 6 cents on the tax rate. So we get this all down to the final tax rate, and what we're looking at, as proposed, the city would be a 51-cent increase, schools 55, the county 6, for a total of $1.12. If we defer and delay that principal payment we talked about earlier under debt service, that takes 18 cents, or that takes the increase on the city side down to 18 cents, and it would bring the entire tax rate increase to 79 cents. So that can have a pretty significant impact if we decide to go in that direction. And Heather, when do you need that decision made by? Thursday?
Next week.
Next week. So that is a decision we need to make sooner as opposed to later because we are in the middle of planning for that bond issue. The tax rate trend, as I think you can see what happened, the tax rate came down starting in 2003 or so. As the economy grew dramatically in the early part of the 2000s. That was the period where we saw the Walmart distribution center, for example, come online. So the tax rate came down on a somewhat corresponding basis.
You got full revenue sharing. Then, too.
Pardon me?
Revenue sharing.
Well, revenue sharing was doing quite well in that time too, yes. Since the recession hit in 2008, you can see that we have been on a steady increase in our tax rate. I will point out, as Heather was mentioning, some portion of that is due to reduction in state aid. If we were receiving the statutorily required amount of revenue sharing, we would have $4 million extra in non-tax revenues. So that represents close to $2 in our tax rate. So instead of a $28 tax rate, we would be looking at a $26 tax rate, which would be considerably lower and obviously a big improvement. So that has had a tremendous impact on our overall tax rate and budget. There are a couple of things in the state budget that are still up in the air, one of which is, because we don't trust the state to always follow through, legislatively, they decided last year to increase the homestead reimbursement from 50% to 62.5%. That was the year they were supposed to do that last year, and they were supposed to, but they pushed it off. So we always get a little bit nervous. Anytime the state says we'll give you more, we want to wait and make sure the budget actually includes that by the time they get done with it. So right at the moment, we are assuming a 50% reimbursement on the homestead. If it goes to 62.5, that's all to the better and will be helpful to us. The other big uncertainty, and this hasn't been talked about much except right at the beginning, and I haven't seen any specifics yet. Obviously, the federal tax reform is having an impact on Maine's income tax system. The governor is working toward proposing some form of conformity that would bring Maine's system into line with the federal system. I don't know how that is going to finally work its way through the legislature or what impact it would have, but it could potentially have some impact on revenue sharing, but I'm not sure. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens with that effort. I've not seen anything in the way of specifics yet. I think there may be something coming out or has recently come out, but clearly that could have an impact on state revenues and then an impact on us as it works its way down through revenue sharing. On the enterprise funds, I'll start with the good news first. We do not need any rate increases next year, so you won't have to worry about that. What you have up there on the screen right now is an estimate of where we will end the year. So we are anticipating that water will operate at about a $38,000 net surplus on a cash basis, and that they will have an ending cash balance of $1.2 million. Sewer will operate with about $90,000 to the good and a $785,000 ending balance, and stormwater at $175,000 to the good at $811,000 balance. On the water utility, revenues have been flat, and they've been flat for a number of years. Water use has not grown, partially through water conservation and partially because we have not seen any dramatic increases in growth. So revenues have been flat. Expenses are up about $373,000. Reasons for that: payroll and benefits for many of the same reasons we have on the city side. Debt service is up $266,000. That will also be affected by the timing of the second bond issue. So if we don't issue bonds and make the first payment next year, that would be reduced by about $105,000. Operating expenses are down about $70,000. Capital outlays up about $154,000. And next is a Thursday that we'll actually be going over the utilities, or later?
It's just public works.
Okay, Thursday we're going to Public Works, but there will be a separate session on the utilities where we will go into much more detail about these. On the sewer utility, revenues are up about $100,000. Expenses are up about $400,000. The biggest reason there is debt service. That again would be affected by debt issuance. If we don't issue in May, if we don't make the first payment next fiscal, that would come down about $194,000, which certainly would be helpful. Payroll and benefits are up about 6%. Operating costs are down slightly. Capital purchases are down. Treatment plant costs are down. This is kind of interesting. For those of you who don't know, we share the treatment plant with Auburn. The costs of the treatment plant are allocated between the two cities based on the flow that we send to the plant and the strength of the waste that come in from each city to the plant. Our percentage of the plant is actually going to increase next year by about 2.5% to 68%, so we're paying 68% of the cost of the plant, but the operating costs and the whole utility are coming down. In part, I think some of that reflects the electricity savings
And their debt service.
and their debt service from doing the anaerobic digester and the cogeneration project. And then capital, or excuse me, there's no rate increase here either. Okay, so I think I've covered that. Stormwater, revenues are up about $10,000, expenses $175,000. Again, same kind of pattern. Capital is down, payroll and benefits are up, debt service is up. Again, it would be up about $123,000 less. And operating costs are up slightly, and again, no rate increase there. What we are projecting, however, is at the end of the year of next year, we will be operating, all of these utilities will operate at somewhat of a loss. These losses will all be better if we push off the debt payment. But right now, as presented, all of them will be losing somewhere between $150,000 and $390,000 a year. They still have cash available, however, at the end of the year. The only thing that's pushing up against cash availability is water and sewer. Water normally has to go through the PUC process, which is very long, convoluted, expensive, and time-consuming. So we'll have to see how things go as to when a water rate increase might be needed. Not clear if it'd be next year, more likely the year after. Similarly, sewer, we normally try to stagger things so it's not all at the same time, but we'll have to see how things work out, so we can't really project for sure the exact timing of a rate increase there. With that, I want to thank the department heads and our employees. Our finance director, obviously, Heather does all of the heavy lifting here with the help of her staff. She took it on, she is now Heather Norm, taking over Norm's responsibilities as well as her own. Luckily, she has made some changes up there so that she's had help and assistance from other people in her department. So that's kind of the big picture. We'll obviously get into much more detail as we go forward. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have now.
When do we get our school budget books? We'll have them
I'm
for
hoping
the
you'll have them
weekend before-
Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
So hopefully you'll have them Thursday.
Jim?
The use of fund balance for, are we looking at that as like a one-time payment type of thing, these expected increase in retirement? I don't know what the formal term is, but I'm just wondering, because...
For severance costs for employees when they retire?
Yes.
That is the one that
Retirement
Makes-
severance payouts.
That makes me a little bit nervous, because those do happen from year to year as people leave. What we've seen is where 3, 4, 5 years ago, we were seeing maybe 3, 4 people leave city service in a year for any reason. We're now seeing considerable growth in the number of people who are leaving, and we anticipate that that's going to continue over the next 4 to 5 years. Is using fund balance for that an ideal use of fund balance? I would not think so, but it is an effort to try to mitigate the tax increase that we're looking at for next year. Everything pretty much else is either one-time or capital.
The other thing is, the city at the end of the fiscal year does set aside accumulated vacation time as part of fund balance. So that amount is already in there. We're just designating it to be paid out this year for those employees that are leaving. So the only piece that's probably not truly set aside at this point are those people that are vested for the sick time payout.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I would remind you quickly, the budget schedule is on the back of the book. And as a reminder, Monday's school committee meeting is at 6 o'clock.
Okay, we'll now have a presentation from the Green Dot program.
Hello, my name is Karen Lane. I'm a Lewiston resident and office administrator of the First Universalist Church. And on behalf of Green Dot, we'd like to thank you for inviting us back to talk a little bit more about our bystander intervention program. We'd like to say one quick thing about ourselves before we get started, and I would say that the best parenting decision that I could have made was 15 years ago bringing my 9-month-old daughter back to Lewiston to grow up a couple of blocks from where I grew up.
Cool. I'm Blake Riley. I'm on my 4th year living in Lewiston here. I work at Bates College. I'm the director of Res Life. We like to keep things a little lively, so sometimes I like some fun facts. I've eaten a 5-pound watermelon in about 46 minutes, so that was an uncomfortable moment. And I have a 14-pound rabbit. He's like this big. His name is LJ. I also have a dog that's 35 pounds, so the dog likes to chase the rabbit. It's a fun thing that happens in my home, so just some random stuff.
Okay, so what is Green Dot? Green Dot is a bystander intervention program that was based on years of research. It aims to reduce power-based personal violence, and Blake will talk a little bit more about what that means. It was tested by the Centers for Disease Control. It's been found to reduce violence in communities where it's been used. The testing that has been finished was in a high school, but there are other tests going on in other locations. And Green Dot conveys the message that our community doesn't tolerate violence and that every one of us has a role to play in keeping each other safe.
So when we talk about the term power-based personal violence, what does that mean? The way that I like to think about it is anything that uses power, control, intimidation, or coercion to harm another person. So that's a really broad term, and it's super intersectional and has a lot of identities and different things that play into that. But within Green Dot training in Lewiston, Auburn, the things that we're focusing on when we say power-based personal violence are harassment, day and domestic violence, and assault, which can include both physical assault and sexual assault.
So we're offering Green Dot very, very widely throughout the community, and that's because norms are set mainly by the actions of our friends and neighbors. Everybody expects our ministers and our police to convey the message, violence isn't all right, and we're all expected to be involved in making sure that there isn't violence. We expect to hear that, so we rarely do hear that. When my neighbor, though, as we're talking about something else, mentions a way that he prevented violence, or when the grocery store manager mentions that they are having Green Dot training to make sure that they are prepared to reduce violence as people come together in the grocery store, that has a lot more impact. So Green Dot came out of a group of citizens who had noticed an increase in harassment as our community had become more diverse. They sought a way to make it easier for people to stand up for each other. They researched a bunch of options. They chose Green Dot because it's both evidence-based and because it was customizable to our location. Green Dot actually came out and asked a lot of questions about our community itself so that they could make sure that this was something that would work for us. And so far, we have put a lot of effort into Green Dot. Our launch week was just last week, but before that, a lot of fundraising was done so that all of the workshops and the instructor trainings would be free, so we could spread it as wide as possible. 4-day trainings for 46 instructors were paid for. 42 ambassadors also got a 4-hour training. And then our launch week was the 5th through the 9th, that's when we came and introduced ourselves to you. We also introduced ourselves to the Auburn City Council. We had a very successful first training at the LA Metropolitan Chamber. And we had a get-to-know-you walk down Lisbon Street where we dropped into a lot of businesses and nonprofits, encouraging them to ask more questions about the Green Dot program.
So what we like to do with this is you hear the term green dot, and most people say, like, why is this called green dot, right? So I like to give a little strategy overview. So if you imagine a map of Lewiston, Auburn, and when you're picturing that map, you see these little red dots popping up. And we don't know how many red dots are in our community. We haven't counted them up, or we don't necessarily have stats on everything. But what we do know is that there's a lot of them. All of us have stories of where we've had a situation and you get that gut feeling, and you're like, something's not right there. And those are those red dot moments, those single choices when someone chooses to do harm to another person with their words or actions. So when we're thinking about those red dot moments, a push or shove behind a closed door, two people leave a bar, somebody's too drunk to have sex, somebody harassing somebody on the street with derogatory language or using language to put them down, all moments that harm other people. How do we change that? How do we shift that? How do we change that culture? And what we think about is the solution has to be a reflection of the problem. So when we're thinking of the solution, we talk about two types of green dots. Your first green dot is a single choice when somebody uses their words or actions to stop a red dot from happening. And that's a reactive green dot, kind of your typical vision of bystander intervention. You see something happen, you get that gut feeling, and you do something about it. It can be something as easy as checking in with a friend after something's happened. It can be calling the police, talking to a store manager, telling somebody that you don't feel like that was okay. All of those things are reactive moments where a bystander would get that gut feeling and then do something about it. But what's really cool about this program and what's different about it that other bystander intervention programs don't have is we also have these moments called proactive green dots. And this is what's really starting to shift, that really makes shifting of cultural norms happen. And those are single choices when an individual makes an effort to change norms or communicate their values. The two values that we're talking about being violence is not okay and everybody is expected to play their part. And these are simple moments. Wearing a green dot shirt, having a green dot pin on, having a symbol in your store window saying that these are the values that we prescribe to here, having a conversation with a friend, something very simple, putting a green dot LA at the bottom of your signature, because what that does is then when people enter this community, they see these symbols and they hear people saying these things, they say, hey, violence isn't tolerated here, and everyone's playing their part, and me as a member entering this community, it's only human nature that you want to step in and start fitting into your new community. So it does, when you look at this map and you have these green dots all popping up, what the ultimate goal of the program is, with those reactive green dots and those proactive green dots, to get more green dots on that map, and when that's happening, violence will be coming down, kind of representative of that culture shift.
So what the training does is it helps people increase their toolkit for responding when they get that gut feeling. We know that intervening isn't always easy. Everybody has barriers that stop them from taking action when they wish somebody would. Our barriers all vary. Some of us are shy. Some of us are hesitant to act before we know everything that we need to about a situation. And barriers don't go away. So any bystander intervention program has to take into account how to respect those barriers and act anyway in a way that keeps safety in mind and also your comfort in mind. So the 3 Ds are the way that we expand a person's toolkit by getting them to think more creatively about the options available to them. Direct intervention is the sort of intervention that most people think of. It would be, for example, speaking up when you're concerned about somebody's behavior. It also could mean checking in directly with a person you're worried about. To delegate might take the form of saying something to bartender or a grocery store manager. It might also mean carrying the phone number for safe voices, so that if you were concerned that somebody was in danger at home, you could pass that along to them and let experts help them. And the choice that I like the most, the distract option, it gives you a chance to be creative. When a situation is building and you have a bad feeling about it and you don't feel comfortable using a direct approach, often a distraction will freeze that moment, break the chain of increasing tension, and allow people to move on. So walk up and ask directions, for example. We heard of one person who would say, "I know your mother." Anything to stop a building tension and move people through that moment is an increased chance of everybody walking away okay. And please don't forget proactive green dots. Anytime that you can communicate that you agree with this community norm that violence isn't okay and that everybody is paying attention is a way that you can help make everybody safer. So that is our briefest training. You've now had a taste of what we are going to be trying to spread among the community. There are 15-minute, 30-minute, and 1-hour workshops. We hope that you will refer businesses, nonprofits, anybody who's interested to the contact information that's on the slide. I think you also have a packet that has it there. You have also, just in this little amount of time, increased your own toolkit by listening. So we would like to challenge you to challenge yourself in the next few days to think of one green dot that you could do over the next couple of days. And we look forward to seeing what you do with that. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Are you going to have a test next week?
No test.
No, but
No
we would
test.
love an email if you have a story.
Email a story?
We would love that.
Well, you know, I have a story in the paper this morning. A little boy was being abused by someone and told his friend, they're 12, and the friend told him to tell his parents, and the friend told his parents, and it got to the school authorities. You saw the article? I thought, wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
That's
because
amazing.
That's amazing.
I know, 12 years old, and
Yeah.
he was smart enough to know to say, tell your parents, and he went home and told his parents.
Yeah,
So,
and that's what this is all about, just increasing more stories like that, more action
Yeah.
About with community members helping other community members.
I think that's great.
Councilor Marco?
Is the local police department involved with the training?
There were 2 police officers in the 4-day training. There,
Being
Joe,
trained?
the trainer training. Yep, Joe Philippon was there, and also an officer from the Auburn Police Department.
Will they be involved in training others?
No, I don't
Because
expect
my
that they'll
concern
be.
is, when I see the word proactive. and
Interesting.
Everyone probably remembers a situation without naming the community member who was involved in an assault charge, which he actually defended himself successfully. But he came to the rescue of someone, and it involved a little bit of contact, and that's why he was charged with assault. But he successfully did defend himself, thank goodness. But I'm concerned with the proactive nature, crossing over into that area.
There's a couple of really good things about, well, there are a lot of really good things about Green Dot, but in that particular area, first of all, everybody makes their own decision about whether or not their action is necessary. And that's true without Green Dot. The difference is that people are more prepared to use a lot of different options. It's intended as de-escalation. We're not suggesting that people try to arrest other people or otherwise take over the job of the police. It's very much a matter of standing with people and supporting each other. I guess that's the...
Well, that would be a good reason for the police department to be involved in the training, as far as finding where those thresholds are to keep the peace.
Yeah, there were a couple of police officers at the 4-day training. So as long as they would like to continue to be engaged as instructors, they can be. The other piece of that is we do have at least support from the police department as ambassadors of the program as well. But I think your point is well taken, being the more we can involve the police and other local agencies, the better.
So I was part of the ambassador training over the summer, and I've done the more extensive training as an employee at Bates. And just sort of, I guess, in response to Councilor Marcotte's question, can you talk about the delegate and the
Distract?
yes, and also just to sort of give a sense, this is not like a militaristic kind of training. I mean, it's very much like meant to be like normal guy on the street sees something wrong, like figures out a way to like take attention away from the actual problem situation. So I think those examples of those two might be helpful in terms of framing what this actually looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the best way to think of is in that situation as well. People get that gut feeling, right? We have that innately. And in training, we do practice recognizing some more warning signs. But what it does is kind of what Karen was talking about, is it builds that toolkit for you. It gives you more options, because a lot of times as people in society, when we think of bystander intervention, we often think of this huge thing and it being this really big deal. And what we do is we work on it from being that to scaling it down to these small moments where you can do small things that can change the outcome of a potentially harmful event. So kind of what Kristen is talking about, when you give people more tools in that toolkit, such as delegate and distract, when someone was initially thinking of the thing that I have to do is the direct intervention, it gives more options for de-escalation, a delegate being you talk to somebody else, or a distract. What this is all about is it's about stopping the harm in the moment. Because what I like to acknowledge is sometimes you're not in the best situation to have that educational moment with someone and say like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. Like, this is not an okay thing to do. Sometimes people will react really poorly to that. So what we're trying to do is just stop the harm there. And in those types of situations, a delegate or a distract may actually be a better form of intervention.
And so distract is like, you know, people are in an argument, like spilling a glass of water. So
Exactly.
there's like distraction from the actual violent situation.
Yeah.
So thank you to you both for coming and presenting and for all the wonderful work you've been doing over time. I think just another point to think about, because this is a lot of violence and a lot of norms are set in power dynamics, thinking about our roles as community leaders, for all of us to really consider. I think one of your greatest moments there was saying a proactive green dot is putting this in our email signatures. So if we're able to do that in Outlook, I think that would be a really great show of support for this program. I have been through the undergraduate training. What was it, 7 hours?
Yeah, something like that.
Blake and I went to the same college, so
did.
it was very lengthy and very comprehensive, and there was a cultural shift on our undergraduate campus as a result of this programming. So if that's something that becomes community-wide beyond a campus community, I think that's really special, and it's a see something, say something kind of model, just for keeping everyone safe. So thank you again for all of the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Councilor Liz.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for your work and your presentation. This kind of reminds me of how I believe that if you don't do something, then you're saying this is okay. You know, so it's almost we have to. And sometimes that's at a family gathering with your uncle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who starts doing something, and that's not easy. But I've seen it, and I've seen it work. I've seen people come back and say, I'm glad you did that. You know what I mean? Even the person involved, because they learned something. And you do it in a way that's respectful as well as you can. And I like the kind of distraction type of thing, but that takes some creative thought. So I think examples of that is
Yeah.
we can just, you know, get them. So, because I remember in training, sometimes you go, oh my God, oh yeah, how about that one? That one will work. You know, so that would be very helpful, I think. So thank you.
One of the great things that I've found is that because these events happen so rarely and in so many different contexts, you can choose one or two that works for you when you're thinking of distractions. You can choose one or two that works and use them over and over again. I use the just sit and watch sometimes if I'm not sure whether to get involved. My daughter is one of my barriers. She worries about me, and she thinks that I get involved too quickly, and it's embarrassing to her. But if I am concerned about a couple of people roughhousing, and I'm not sure whether it's just a couple of people playing or whether it could be the beginning of a mugging because of the situation that we're in, if I pull my car over and just open the window and just watch, at the very worst, I'm a weird lady that's looking at them. But at the best, I might have stopped one person from taking advantage of another person.
And to your point, Counselor Lyson, I think it's, what we do in training is we do exactly what you're talking about. It's just examples, 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 and really starting to consider those situations and what you would do in them. So that's what it's all about.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And you know you have a resolve on this, on the agenda.
Yes.
Under
Ye-
item 7, that the council's going to be acting on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take 4 minutes off, folks. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And we will now go to an update and a presentation from our Lewiston Youth Advisory Council representative.
Hi, my name is Emma Williams, and I'm the chair of Lewiston Youth Advisory Council. At the request of Mayor Bouchard, the Youth Council has undertaken a youth survey project for Lewiston 12th, 8th, and 4th graders. Mayor Bouchard would like to learn about the youth perspective of Lewiston, what they like here, and how they foresee Lewiston in the future. As the Advisory Council is focusing on ways to enhance Lewiston, its image, encouraging residents to learn more about Lewiston, we feel the survey project would be a good fit for us. We really appreciate Mayor Bouchard for asking us to undertake the survey project. After significant brainstorming what we want to ask the youth and how we want to present the survey, we met with Mayor Bouchard, City Council Liaison Zachary Pettingill, and Darby Ray of the Bates College Harvard Center for Community Partnerships. We invited Darby Ray because she has a significant survey experience. They listened to ideas and what we discussed and the most effective way to gather information and data results. Darby then worked up a draft to receive further input from us. Their survey has been sent to the principal of Lewiston High School to distribute to 12th graders during their DA classes. We'll be following up with 8th graders and also plan to do site visits versus an actual survey with the 4th graders. And I have a survey that I'm going to show on the screen to you guys.
Yes.
Here we go. You want them to,
Okay, it's a little slow, yeah.
we're going to have them put their student ID number in for them to be eligible for a cash prize. Some of the questions are, what was your relationship to Lewiston? What are your favorite things about Lewiston? What relationship do you think you'll have with Lewiston once you finish high school? Some are probably go to college and are near you Lewiston. I probably won't live in Lewiston in the future, but I will return. I'll probably leave in Lewiston and not return. If you answer that you probably leave Lewiston and not return, what will make you want to stay or come back? What do you want in the community when you live and when you're an adult? A good job, career, safe community, nice weather, some of the answers you could choose from. Are there factors that would keep you from living in Lewiston as an adult? If yes, what are they? If you were to live in Lewiston as an adult, what type of living arrangement would most appeal to you? A large home, a small home, a condom? A condominium. Is there anything you would like to change about Lewiston? What would you hear? And then what do you hear other people say about Lewiston? Our next meeting is March 21st, and we'll be discussing plans for recycling awareness contest with third graders. Do you have any questions? All right.
So on the recycling awareness thing with third graders, is that at a specific school or just sort of across district?
It's going to be cross district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, and then I have a packet of the slideshow for you guys for the survey.
Okay. Acceptance of the minutes for the March 6th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion by Councilor Lewiston, Councilor Marcotte.
I entered a few changes with Kathy, so as long as that motion is with amendments to housekeeping.
You agree with this?
Yes, thank you, we'll incorporate those, yes.
Thank you.
Council.
Certainly.
Okay, show of hands, all in favor? Unanimous, minutes are approved. We'll now go to a public comment period. Any member of the public make comments about Lewiston City Government for anything that is not on the agenda? Okay, no public comment. Roll call.
All roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 6.
Consent agenda.
There are 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. Item number 1, order authorizing execution of municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 12 Fair Street. Number 2, order authorizing execution of municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 12 Horton Street. And item number 3, authorization to accept transfer of forfeiture funds.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Councilor Cloutier, seconded by Councilor Beam. Call the roll.
Councilor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
and Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 4.
Item number 4, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Bare Bones Incorporated, 43 Lisbon Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Bare Bones Incorporated, 43 Lisbon Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Council. To the public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes,
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
and Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for Da Vinci's 150 Mill Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Da Vinci's 150 Mill Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Nobody here objects to Da Vinci's, right?
Or bare bones, for that matter.
Yeah, right. Public,
Certainly not Bare Bones.
back to no objections. Okay, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
yes,
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
and Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Do a quick swap here, move to number 7.
Item number 7, resolve recognizing the Green Dot LA Initiative. Requested action to approve the resolve recognizing the Green Dot LA Initiative.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Further comments on the council? Public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
yes,
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
and Ward 5.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Thank you very much for presenting today. And we'll go back to number 6.
Item number 6, order authorizing the city administrator to take the necessary steps to sell the city-owned properties at 20 Wynn Street, 7 Acorn Lane, 11 Jack Court, and 152 Randall Road. Requested action to approve the order authorizing the city administrator to take the necessary steps to sell the city-owned property at 20 Wynn Street, 7 Acorn Lane, 11 Jack Court, and 152 Randall Road.
So moved.
second,
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Marcotte. Any discussion on the council? Counselor Marcotte?
I have a question on 11 Jack Court. I noticed that there were no bids on 12 Jack Court. Is 12 contiguous?
No, it's across the alley.
It's across
Well,
the
across
street?
the street. It's in the same area, but not adjacent, not immediately adjacent to the lot.
Because I would have suggested if it was adjacent, just tack it on.
It's not, we actually had a couple of folks who might have been interested in 12 Court, and I think we may, when we put that out to proposal again, we may get a proposal on it.
Okay.
Anyone from the public here? Oh, step right up to the podium, sir, and just name and address as well, thank you.
I'm Curtis Roundy, Shawmut Street. Put a bid in on 20 Wynn Street, and I just wanted to weigh in on that a little bit. In addition to the funds that I had offered for the property, I also mentioned that I would have the property up and running in 6 weeks, and it could be assessed at full value, and the tax started at that point. And when I got the note back on the 2 bids, there was no reference to that. So I feel that the city would benefit earlier and probably more with that offer than the other one, even though the financial offers were very close. So I figured it was worth coming down and having a weigh in on that, however that works. So.
Any questions for Mr. Roundy from the council?
I just wondered if maybe somebody could explain that. I don't understand what's going on.
I can give a
Or
little
the
bit,
issue.
a quick little bit of
I can,
background
yeah.
on this. Obviously, the property was put out to bid. We did get 2 bids. One from one party for $8,700. Those individuals are, as I understand it, currently living on an adjacent property with a relative and are interested in demolishing the existing building and building a new building on the property. And then Mr. Roundy made a proposal of $7,500 for rehabilitation of the property. The purchasing agent recommended that we award to the party offering us the most money. I do not have specifics as to what their intention or time frame is in terms of building on that property. So that's what I know, and the basis for the recommendation was that it was the higher bid.
As well, it has a foundation already existing on the property, and I understand that it can be developed for business use, where it's a business district. So I'm looking into that as well. So those are things that I think should be thought about other than just the money up front.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comment? Okay, back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
And Ward 5?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, resolve reallocating $179,000 of CDBG program income from the Commercial Revolving Loan Fund to another CDBG eligible project. Requested action to approve the resolve reallocating $179,000 from CDBG program income from the Commercial Revolving Loan Fund to another CDBG eligible project.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Beam. Input from the council. To the public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
And Ward 5?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, reports and updates. Do we have one from the school committee?
We do. Excited. So we have been having lots of budget meetings, and the school district budget is online at this point. We've been going through and making our list of things we want to add and change. We did hear from the superintendent last night that there will be a change in the administration of proficiency-based learning in the district, and that will impact the budget by allocating funds that were originally designated for a software system back into instructional supplies. So that is a matter of judgment if that's good or not. But we will be meeting with the city council next week to talk about where that budget stands and continuing to hear from the different centers. There was also a discussion of snow days. We've had quite a large amount this year, and so if you'd like to weigh in on that, please reach out to the superintendent or the school committee at large as a whole. There you go. Thanks.
Any other reports or updates from the council? Okay, we're going to move on to other business. I'll actually get started. The Public Works Oversight Committee is reforming starting tomorrow, and Councilor Beam and I will be sitting on that committee. And while we are already going to be looking towards sidewalk plowing and the LCIP requests, is there anything else a member of the council would like us to put on our punch list in regards to Public Works?
Just the solid waste or the recycling
Yes, recycling and
composting.
recycling subcommittee will also be part of the discussion. Tomorrow's more of an organizational, just getting a list of what we're going to be working on.
So, as we think about city departments, I think Public Works is one of the ones that's most visible. And so I think that, I guess I just wonder what our process is in terms of, like, if community members have questions or concerns, getting those to the Public Works Committee to address.
I would say at this point, sending your counselor or myself an
Okay.
email, or Counselor Beam,
Okay.
or if any of you receive any emails, please forward them to Jolene or I.
Okay.
Or Dennis, who is going to be our staff liaison, as he may have a little bit of Public Works experience we can tap into.
And I'm always available as well, so.
Okay.
Excellent. And this year, we've retained a lot of the members from the past committee, so we have a lot of good knowledge. Plus, because we're working on recycling and maybe targeting the inner city, I did invite a larger landlord/property manager into the group as well, so we can get that point of view.
One of the things that we mentioned in the budget about the changes at the Punch Pass and the landfill or whatever, could we get maybe a report on that to see how that?
Sure.
I mean, some of that's guesstimates, I would assume, but based upon this
And that was
past
kind
year.
of on my list too as a follow-up, so yes, definitely I'll make sure we do that.
And then can you give us a rundown of who's on the committee again?
Off the top of my head, myself, Councilor Beam, Gary St. Laurent, John Gendron, John Butler, Paul Robinson. I added Mike Brochu, who's a resident of Ward 4 with considerable construction experience. I believe he works for Damon Mechanical now, worked for Sargent Construction. He'd actually applied for planning board, but so did 10 other people from Ward 4. And I added Steve Lebrecq, who you said in the Downtown Action Committee, that's our landlord with, so. All right. Anyone else have any other city business? Councilor Lyson.
I'd make a motion to enter into executive session concerning a legal matter.
Sounds ominous.
Okay, all in favor?